end of term and going home. The Great Hall had never looked more inclusive. Banners hung from every corner, not just the traditional house colours, but rainbow flags, various pride flags Harry didn't even recognise, and what appeared to be a banner reading "Celebrate Neurodiversity" in glittery letters. Professor McGonagall had spent the better part of the morning ensuring that every possible dietary restriction, religious observance, and cultural sensitivity was addressed for the end-of-term feast. "Before we begin," Dumbledore announced, standing at the podium with his usual uncertain demeanour, "I'd like to acknowledge that Hogwarts sits on the ancestral lands of the House Elves, who were displaced through centuries of magical colonialism. We recognise their continuing connection to this land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging." Several students looked confused. Hermione was furiously taking notes. Additionally, Dumbledore continued, "We want to create a safe space for all students to celebrate, regardless of their house affiliation, which we now recognise as a potentially problematic sorting system that may reinforce harmful hierarchies." "Get on with it, you old fool," Professor Snape muttered from the staff table, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us got bitches to see after this." The other professors shifted uncomfortably. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat pointedly, but nobody dared correct him. "Yes, well," Dumbledore fumbled, "perhaps we should address the house points. Though I want to emphasise that points are just a social construct and don't determine anyone's worth as a person." Harry sat between Ramad and Hermione at the Gryffindor table, still feeling surreal about everything that had happened. The whole Quirrell situation had been deeply unsettling, not just the part where he'd tried to steal the gender-critical stone. Harry still wasn't entirely clear on what made it gender-critical, but Hermione had assured them it was definitely about dismantling the patriarchy, but the weird romantic obsession he'd had with Voldemort. "It's actually quite problematic," Hermione was saying to a nearby group of second years, "how the house system reinforces a binary thinking pattern that mirrors the gender binary. Gryffindor versus Slytherin, good versus evil, it's all very reductive." "Sister, please," Ramad interrupted, adjusting his kufi, "can we not turn everything into a lecture? Allah blessed us with victory over the Cartha, Alan Jalila." "Don't call me sister, that's gendered language," Hermione snapped. "And we need to examine how religious extremism." Extremism. Ramad stood up, nearly knocking over his goblet of halal grape juice. "Wally, you going too far now. There's nothing extreme about praising Allah for our success." Harry sighed and put their head in their hands. These two had been going at it for weeks now. Every conversation somehow turned into a debate about intersectionality versus religious freedom. "The teachers are all biased against students who emoji the normies," came Draco's voice from across the hall, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What the bloody hell is he talking about?" asked Neville. "Insult terminology," Hermione said grimly. "He's become even more black-pilled since learning about Hogwarts dating app statistics." Apparently, that was his final straw. "What the bloody hell is he talking about?" asked Neville. "Mashallah, that boy needs to find Allah," Ramad declared. "The path of jihad against the Nafs would cure his sickness. Could you please stop bringing religion into everything?" Hermione exploded. "This is exactly the kind of patriarchal thinking that—" "Silence!" Professor Snape's voice boomed across the hall. "You'll need to shut the hell up and let the old white man finish his speech." "Damn!" Dumbledore looked grateful for the intervention, despite its problematic delivery. "Now then," Dumbledore continued nervously, "the house points. In fourth place, Slytherin, with 312 points. Though I want to emphasise that this doesn't reflect their worth as individuals, and we recognise that the house point system may inherently disadvantage students from different backgrounds." The Slytherin table sat in sullen silence. Draco was muttering something about height moddings and canthal tilts. In third place, Hufflepuff, with 352 points. We celebrate their commitment to inclusivity and consent-based collaboration. Polite applause. The Hufflepuffs seemed pleased with the recognition of their values. In second place, Ravenclaw, with 426 points. We honour their pursuit of knowledge while recognising that different ways of knowing are equally valid. What does that even mean? Harry whispered. It means they're trying not to seem elitist about academic achievement, Hermione whispered back. Very problematic approach, honestly. We should be celebrating intellectual rigor while also ensuring equal access to. And in first place, Dumbledore announced Gryffindor with 472 points. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Harry felt a warm feeling in their chest, their first real victory, their first real belonging. However, Dumbledore continued, raising his hand, I feel we must acknowledge some recent events that deserve recognition. To Miss Granger, for her intersectional analysis of the enchantments protecting the gender-critical stone, 20 points. Hermione beamed. Finally, someone recognizes the importance of applying critical theory to magical problems. To Mr. Ulwayser, Dumbledore continued, using Rahmed's family's chosen surname, for demonstrating that faith and courage are not mutually exclusive, 20 points. Alan Jalila? Rahmed shouted, pumping his fist in the air. Allah is the greatest. And to Harry Potter, Dumbledore's voice grew more solemn, for showing us that authenticity in the face of oppression is perhaps the greatest magic of all, 60 points. The hall erupted. Harry felt tears in their eyes, not just from the recognition, but from being seen, truly seen, for who they were. This brings Gryffindor's total to 572 points, Dumbledore announced. Though I want to emphasize that this victory belongs to all of us, as we've all grown through our shared commitment to justice and inclusion. Yo, can we eat now? Professor Snape called out. I got plans tonight, and y'all are killing my vibe with all this conveyor shit. Professor McGonagall looked mortified. Severus, really? What? You'll know I keep it real. That's why they hired me, for diversity. Might as well lean into it. The feast began with its usual magical abundance, but Harry noticed the extra care taken for different dietary needs. There were halal options clearly marked for Rahmed and the handful of other Muslim students, kosher options, vegan alternatives, and even what appeared to be a section labeled culturally sensitive fusion cuisine. This is actually quite impressive, Hermione admitted, loading her plate with sustainably sourced vegetables. Though I do wonder about the carbon footprint of magically transporting all these ingredients. Everything doesn't have to be a political statement, Harry said gently. Sometimes food is just food. But that's exactly the kind of thinking that perpetuates systems of oppression. Hermione protested. Every choice we make is political, whether we acknowledge it or not. Sister, sorry, comrade, Rahmed corrected himself quickly, you need to touch grass. Not everything is about your theories. Did you just tell me to touch grass? That's internet slang. And extremely dismissive of legitimate academic discourse. Harry tuned them out and looked around the great hall. Despite all the absurdity, despite the over-the-top political correctness and the endless debates about every little thing, they felt happy. For the first time in their life, they were in a place where being different wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. Well, mostly celebrated. Draco was still muttering about wristles and beta uprising, and Professor Snape had just called Professor Sprout a thick as shorty while discussing the mandrakes, but even that chaos felt better than the suffocating conformity of Privet Drive. As the feast wound down, students began saying their goodbyes. The Ulwayser family approached their table. Mrs. Ulwayser, her face covered by a traditional niqab, spoke warmly to Harry. Habibi, you are always welcome in our home. Any friend of Rahmed's is family to us. Thank you, Mrs. Ulwayser, Harry said, genuinely touched. That means everything to me. And remember, she added, pressing a small package into Harry's hands, there are many ways to be strong. Your parents would be proud of the person you're becoming. Mr. Ulwayser nodded approvingly. Indeed. Courage comes in many forms. Standing up for yourself, standing up for others, both are jihad in their own way. Could we please not use that word so casually? Hermione interjected. Given the current political climate and the way it's been weaponized by. YA Hermione, Rahmed sighed, jihad just means struggle. The greater jihad is the struggle against one's own nafs, one's ego and base desires. It's actually quite progressive when you understand it properly. but the connotations in Western society are based on Islamophobic misrepresentations that we shouldn't reinforce by avoiding the proper use of our own religious terminology, Mrs. Olwayser said firmly but kindly. Perhaps this summer you could read some actual Islamic scholars instead of just Western academic critiques. Hermione looked chastened. You're right. I apologize. That was actually quite problematic of me. Harry smiled. Even Hermione could learn and grow. The next morning brought the chaos of packing and departure. Harry carefully folded their new robes, the gender-neutral ones Madame Morkin had eventually created after much consultation and several fittings. They tucked away the small pride flag Hermione had given them, and the prayer beads Ramad had insisted they take for protection, whether you believe or not. You sure you'll be all right with those muggles? Ramad asked, shouldering his own trunk. I'll survive, Harry said. Besides, I'm different now. Stronger. They can't make me feel ashamed of who I am anymore. That's the spirit, Habibi, Ramad grinned. And if they give you too much trouble, just remember what the Quran says, and whoever relies upon Allah, then he is sufficient for him. Indeed, Allah will accomplish his purpose. Not everyone shares your faith, you know, Hermione said, but not unkindly. The wisdom transcends the specific religious framework, Ramad replied. It's about trusting that justice will prevail, whatever name you give to justice. Actually, Hermione mused, that's not dissimilar to Marx's concept of historical inevitability. Oh, for fuck's sake, came Professor Snape's voice as he passed by with his own luggage. You all gonna philosophize all the way to the train? Some of us trying to get home to our side chicks. Severus. Professor McGonagall snapped. What? I'm just being authentic to my lived experience as a black man in academia. Isn't that what you all wanted? Harry bit back a laugh. Snape had definitely figured out how to weaponize wokeness for his own ends. The train ride back to London was bittersweet. Harry sat with their friends, watching the magical landscape give way to ordinary British countryside. They'd be back to Privet Drive soon, back to Vernon's hostility and Petunia's awkward attempts at acceptance. But they weren't the same person who'd left. You know what I realized? Harry said suddenly. What? Hermione looked up from her book, titled Decolonizing Magical Education, A Critical Analysis. All this time, I thought the problem was me. That I was broken or wrong somehow. But the real problem was a world that couldn't accept difference. Subhanallah, Ramad nodded approvingly. The problem was never you, Archie. The problem was a society built on rigid hierarchies that serve only the powerful. Exactly. Hermione agreed enthusiastically. That's why we need to dismantle these systems of oppression wherever we find them. Even when those systems are literally just people wanting to eat dinner without a lecture about carbon footprints. Harry asked teasingly. Especially then, Hermione declared, completely missing the sarcasm. That's when the work is most important. Harry laughed. Their friends were absolutely ridiculous, but they were their friends. And at Hogwarts, ridiculous was just normal. The train pulled into King's Cross Station with its usual hiss of steam and screech of brakes. Harry gathered their things, feeling that familiar twist of anxiety in their stomach. But underneath it was something new, confidence. Remember, Ramad said, pulling Harry into a hug, you are not alone anymore. We're always here for you. The revolution needs all of us, Hermione added, joining the hug. Your liberation is bound up with mine, which is bound up with everyone's. Did you just quote Angela Davis at a train station goodbye? Harry asked. I quote Angela Davis everywhere. She's incredibly relevant to our current struggles against. I'm going to miss you both so much, Harry interrupted, squeezing them tight. They walked through the barrier together, emerging into the bustling muggle world of King's Cross. And there, looking supremely uncomfortable and checking his watch impatiently, stood Vernon Dursley. His face went through several expressions when he saw Harry, confusion, recognition, and then that familiar look of disgusted resignation. Well, he said stiffly, I suppose you look different. Harry straightened their shoulders. I look like myself, Uncle Vernon. For the first time in my life. Vernon's mustache twitched. Yes, well. Your aunt is in the car. She's trying, you know. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not trying to make anything hard, Harry said calmly. I'm just trying to be honest about who I am. Behind them, they could hear Hermione loudly explaining to her parents about the intersectional nature of oppression in magical communities, while Ramad was greeting his family in Arabic. What are you looking at? Vernon snapped at a passerby who'd been staring at the Elwayser family. Harry blinked in surprise. Had Vernon justly defended someone? People stare, Vernon muttered. It's rude. Always has been. Maybe people could change after all. Even just a little bit. The car ride back to Privet Drive was awkward, but not hostile. Petunia had prepared Harry's old room, though she'd awkwardly removed some of the more aggressively gendered decorations Dudley had put up as a prank years earlier. I didn't know what. I mean, I wasn't sure how you'd want things, she said nervously. But I got some new sheets. Neutral colours. Thank you, Aunt Petunia, Harry said genuinely. That was thoughtful. She flashed with pleased embarrassment. That evening at dinner, Vernon made an effort to use Harry's preferred pronouns. He stumbled a few times, corrected himself with visible frustration, but kept trying. So, he said eventually, cutting his roast beef with perhaps more force than necessary, this skull of yours. It's good for you. Yes, Harry said simply. I have friends there. Real friends. And teachers who see me for who I am. Good, Vernon said gruffly. Everyone should have that, I suppose. It wasn't perfect. Vernon still clearly struggled with Harry's identity, still made uncomfortable faces when Harry corrected his pronouns, still muttered under his breath about things being simpler in my day. But he was trying. And for the first time since Harry could remember, that felt like enough. That night, Harry lay in their bed, not his bed, such a small thing, but it mattered, and thought about the year that had passed. They'd faced down Voldemort himself, or at least his creepy face on the back of Quirrell's head. They'd learned magic, made friends, found a place where they belonged. More importantly, they'd learned that they didn't have to choose between being authentic and being accepted. The right people, the people worth having in your life, would accept you as you were. And the people who couldn't? Well, they were missing out. Harry smiled in the darkness and drifted off to sleep, already counting the days until they could return to Hogwarts, to their real home, their real family, and whatever ridiculous adventures awaited them there. After all, with friends like Hermione, who would probably spend the summer writing a manifesto about house elf liberation, and Ramad, who was definitely going to try to convert half the neighbourhood to Islam, next year was bound to be even more chaotic than this one. Harry couldn't wait.